So firstly, thank you to the members who support this channel. Again, if you could, leave a comment. It really helps, it pushes up in terms of the algorithm. And furthermore as well, if you subscribe, like, share this content, if you take value from it, and click that bell notification to be alerted when I next upload a video. That all helps me. So this sort of ties in with my current analysis that I'm almost finished, maybe 5 pages or so left to do on my Leave the World Behind analysis. And as we see, the world is beginning to devolve into the next stage of this transitionary era. Now you will have wars and rumours of wars. Of course, you're going to have World War III as well. That's something we saw within Leave the World Behind. The noise, if you, again, put it through a spectrogram, you actually get the translation out from that of the Albert Einstein quote regarding World War III and knowing the weapons that will be used in that. Not knowing the weapons that will be used in that, but knowing damn well the weapons that will be used in World War IV, because it will be sticks and stones, right? That alludes to this notion of the Great Reset, right? And this all ties in with that. So firstly, let us look at some of the developments geopolitically. So we see that Germany is preparing for, now this is the headline of course, this is all hyperbolic, so bear that in mind, but the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? It's not quite as severe as this, but it shows energetically an escalation, right? We're on the escalation escalator, as some commentators like to state. Germany is preparing for Putin attack against NATO in 2025. Leaked secret plans reveal step by step how Russia will escalate conflict to all-out war in 18 months, right? Again, they're building up the casus belli. They're building up the hatred for Russia and that idea that Russia is an existential threat, along with the rest of the Eurasian bloc. Of course, within Eurasia, both Russia, China and the rest of the BRICS countries, and even out with the BRICS countries, they are beginning to sow those same psychological seeds within their own populace's minds too. However, there's some other headlines which state that Germany is actually preparing for an attack in February. And of course, the Swedish Defence Minister just came out too, very recently, and warned all Swedes to get, ready to prepare for a war with Russia. So interesting, right? Very interesting. And of course, this comes off the back of really what is the near defeat of Ukraine. I mean, it's approaching. Their reserves are down. The morale is gone. I mean, it's totally sapped from the Ukrainian army, it seems. So, again, we're going into the next phase of that Russo-Ukraine flashpoint, which seems to include NATO going up against Russia. Now, of course, there's been further, that alone is, quite a large development. But interestingly, we see that, of course, with the flashpoint in Israel, which began with the Hamas attack, so the Israel-Hamas conflict, it seems that that's about to spread across the Middle East too, right? So you also have the Houthi rebels within Yemen. They have been attacking supposedly, right? I say supposedly, this is the narrative. They have been attacking US and Western shipping. Now, of course, the US and UK, I believe, have dropped around about, it's between 60 and 100 bombs or something like that upon Houthi targets within Yemen. Now, In response to that, we've seen further targeting of US shipping within the Red Sea, the vital Red Sea trade lane. We've seen the Iranian Revolutionary Guard target what they call anti-Iranian terrorist organizations near the recently installed American consulate in Erbil, northern Iraq. So again, you're beginning to see the escalation. Of course, the attack on the Houthis was meant to reel in Iran, right? To provide a justification to Iran to thus escalate the conflict within the Middle East. Again, across these two axes, the sort of Eastern European, or European rather, axes with the Russo-Ukraine conflict, and the axes of the Middle East with Israel and Hamas. And of course that's now spreading, that will spread with Israel and Iran essentially. What we're seeing as well with the Houthi thing is they're seeking to bring in Syria and also bring in Iran, which will then bring in Russia and potentially China too. They may attack Taiwan, given a world war, right? And of course, if the US, or essentially NATO, is fighting upon three fronts, Europe, the Middle East, of course, China will seize that opportunity to open a further theatre within the Pacific. That will naturally lead to the rapid annexation by the mainland China against Taiwan, right? The annexation of Taiwan. That will be concluded in maybe 2-3 weeks if the US is lucky, right? And of course Taiwan. Of course, as well, we see the IDF have killed a few people. There was, an exchange of gunfire at the Egypt-Israel border. Now, interestingly, I was actually wondering how Israel were going to bring Egypt into this this fold of war. But it seems to be that these were suspected drug smugglers attempting to cross the Egypt-Israel border, and then the IDF opened fire on them. Therefore, it says it will, therefore it wasn't quite, a diplomatic incident between the two nations, Egypt and Israel. So, but this provides further escalation in terms of the narrative, the media narrative, the headlines, right? It gets the Western populace on a war footing. That's what it's designed to do. And also it projects fear. It induces fear in the populace, primarily the Western populace. Of course, within a lot of the headlines, for example, we see the Daily Mail online, the descent into World War III, how Russia, Iran and China are simultaneously making moves that will drag us all into conflict, right? It's constant saber rattling, right, from the West. So throughout the article it goes into Iran, the axis of resistance, including Lebanon's Hezbollah, Yemen's Houthi rebels, right, increasing their attacks on Israel. I wish to state, the reason they want Syria, Iran, Yemen, the Houthis, all of those, even Egypt, all of those countries, and of course Lebanon with Hezbollah, all of those countries, they want them involved, is because they want to take them out. Because this is part of the Greater Israel project, right? And of course, with Yemen, that is right at the narrowest point between East Africa and obviously Yemen. That narrow pass is the it's the narrowest point in the Red Sea trade lane. It's of vital importance to thus control the trade coming to and from the Red Sea. And of course, Israel has to annex the Sinai province of Egypt to thus be provided with ease of access and suzerainty over the Suez Canal, right? That entire area, the reason it is the Holy Land isn't really because it's holy. It's because 3 or 4 trade routes, major trade routes, converge at that point over land and sea. And that has been the case since, ancient times. Ancient times. So it is of strategic importance and conceivably always will be. But the interesting thing is, we see that Israel is actually beginning to become bogged down in Gaza. So that is also another issue for Israel, right? It's another issue as well for the Anglo-American Empire. But both sides in this conflict are totally controlled. Make no qualms about it. Both sides are controlled. What I think they're going to go towards, which is what I've been speaking of for the last 2 years, since the beginning of this Russo-Ukraine conflict, this flashpoint, is that they seek a perpetual war doctrine. In fact, I actually think I mentioned in one of those videos in early 2022, right when Russia invaded Ukraine, I mentioned that this would spread, that flashpoints would open up in several key locations like Taiwan, of course Israel and Iran, and the Eastern European flashpoint, which began it all. They're creating flashpoints along these major geopolitical axes to thus almost act as an ignition source for the mass global conflagration that they desire. That brings us in to what is the reason for all of this, right? What is the reason for this? Like what we see within Leave the World Behind, it will be a multi-pronged attack against all of these various societies. Of course, the Perpetual War doctrine will keep us all locked into fear and on a war footing, which will ensure the emergency use of dictatorial and draconian powers are thus provided ad infinitum, forever, without end, to the state, right? And to this emerging globalized state, right? The UN, of course, eventually you will find a world sovereign who will sit atop a throne of the world. That is exactly what is desired by this clique. And this is the transitionary point to that destination, right? It's written within the Zohar. Everyone who waged war against Jerusalem, all of the nations, the idol-worshipping nations, they shall meet their end, right? They shall all end, but the Lord stated to the seed of Jacob, I shall not make an end to you, right? And of course, you shall have a world sovereign and a physical kingdom, a Malkuth, right? Or a Malkut. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. This is the Eretz Yisrael Hashlema. That's exactly what this is, the Greater Israel Project. Now, of course, too, the US is on the verge of fracturing, right? There's going to be a Caesar character that takes power. Be him from the business sector, the political sector, or most likely the military sector, right? He's going to curry favour with, of course, the military apparatus of the US, the military personnel of the US, and they will follow him. There will be some sort of civil war. That's why you're seeing the predictive program, the social priming, vis-a-vis the likes of the upcoming spring film titled literally Civil War. Even Leave the World Behind makes allusions to that was the final stage, the third stage, that if the society was dysfunctional enough, the first 2 stages would induce a civil war, a coup d'etat, right? total unbridled chaos. Why do they want unbridled chaos? Well, like we see with the World Economic Forum, recently, the headline states in one of its articles on its page, its website, Global Cybersecurity Outlook 2024, right? Within that article, they are in collaboration with Accenture, right? And this is in collaboration with Sandbox AQ. Now, both of these companies are, in essence, IT services, right? But on a large global scale. Now, they're collaborating to help organizations protect data against AI-driven cyber threats and quantum-based decryption attacks, right? Now, of course, as well, this is to provide the apparatus, the security apparatus to the emerging technologies systems, right? What are those systems? Well, within the article itself, it lays those out. And those are illuminated as the likes of the CBDC system, the 15-minute cities, and the surveillance apparatus that will be utilised to enforce such a system. And of course the AI systems that will eventually merge into the Internet of all things. That's exactly what this is all about. They're building the digital prison, right? And they're building the bars of it. And Accenture and Sandbox AQ are involved in that right now. But of course, if you provide that perpetual war situation, if you employ that doctrine, you ensure the emergency use powers and the war footing, the war mentality of the people, right, to put up with draconian measures because it's for the war effort. You permit yourself the power, the political flexibility, the political maneuverability to impose these draconian measures, to impose the digital Internet of all things like system upon the populace, right? You can foist it on them more easily. That's why they need war. Now, interestingly too, this comes off the back. Oh, before I state that, we also see from LBC leading Britain's conversation, cyber attacks, riots and lies. Leaked documents show step-by-step plan for how Putin could trigger World War III. Cyber attacks, riots and lies. That's exactly the three stages that we see within Leave the World Behind, right? To sow confusion, to isolate, and then to induce a coup d'etat. Now this ties in with what we're going to mention regarding the next thing, but I'll read some of the article. The plans depict a hypothetical future scenario where Russia mobilises 200,000 more men as its forces are bogged down in Ukraine. Putin uses them to launch a spring offensive, winning the war in June in a nightmare scenario for Europe. Hybrid attacks are then launched on the west, before Russia builds up forces on the border with NATO countries Poland and Lithuania. After stirring up tensions in the Baltics, NATO deploys 300,000 soldiers east on Day X. Now, we're going to get the next thing we're going to mention involves X, right? And the X is the Phoenician version of the Tav letter. So the X is the Phoenician Tav letter. The Tav letter, of course, is within the Hebrew alphabet, of which is 22 letters long. Of course, that corresponds with the 22 tarot cards of the Major Arcana deck, right? However, the Tav links with the end. It is the end, right, of the cycle, the Alpha and the Omega. That's why Elon Musk has bought Twitter. It's black and white and it's just the X, right? It's the end, right? For example, SpaceX as well. They constantly keep blowing up. It's the end of the space age, if you will, right? The intrepid adventures into quote-quote space, right? Then whether you believe it's fake or not, right? It doesn't really matter. I mean, that narrative within the psyche of the populace, the overall meta of it has ended. That's what SpaceX really is, the ending of it. So you have DX, right? DX. As they stare down Russian forces over the Suwalki Gap, the region between Moscow's satellite Belarus and its Kaliningrad enclave, the papers were leaked from the German Ministry of Defense to Bild, a German newspaper. The Alliance Defense 2025 plans are not an early warning of how events will go, but a hypothetical. Now you'll notice with what we're going to mention as well, with what the WHO are discussing, this disease X, right? They're all hypothetical scenarios. They call them knowable unknowns. How do you get a knowable unknown? Right? That's just double speak for a plan, an agenda, right? Another one of their preparedness games, right? Where it's actually them predictively programming, predictively projecting onto the populace to social prime them for these next events, right? To provide them a little bit of psychological warning. It helps to familiarise one's psyche with it. So, a hypothetical scenario for decision makers to consider as they evaluate possible future confrontations with Russia. And of course, then it goes into that NATO sends 300,000 troops east on day X some point in summer 2025, and war breaks out 30 days later, right? So, it states, true to form, Russia would use its status in the UN to claim it as the victim. Under the scenario, Russia accuses the West of preparing to attack it and moves in a pair of tank divisions and a mechanised infantry division division in March next year. According to this hypothetical scenario. Of course, the Suwalki Gap. Suwalki its etymology is Lithuanian. Literally means the place near the swampy area, right? Of course, the swampy area is typically where sacrifices took place, usually in Europe all the way as far south as, say, Anatolia. But that's where a lot of the sacrifices to these demiurgic deities took place, these chthonic deities too, like Saturnian-like deities, these deities that existed within the darkness, yet they were also creator deities. They were deities who fashioned the world, and they demanded sacrifice. They were jealous entities and all of this. However, this links with Disease X, right? So it states, world leaders to meet to discuss threat of hypothetical Disease X in a preparedness exercise, right? So the same thing with Event 201. Prior to the event that began in 2020, what is Disease X? How scientists are preparing for the next, PAN, DEMIC, Disease X, which can cause 20 times more deaths than, CUF, to be discussed. And of course, we have Dr. John Campbell come out with videos very recently, in the last few days, Disease X. And then another title reads, the second PANDEMIC, right? The next PAN, And then Forbes, what is Disease X? Right-wing circles slam hypothetical scenario. So again, right-wing circles. So if you're skeptical of corporations and the unholy alliance between corporations and government, then of course you must be right-wing. Of course, right? X is the TAV, right? The end. This is why you're seeing the prevalence of the X everywhere. It is the end, the TAV. The T shape as well is another variant of the TAV. But it is the end. Funnily enough, when the angel of destruction came, within the Old Testament in Egypt, it was the Tav sign that was painted in blood above the doors of the Israelites. Just a bit of trivia there. However, Disease X is a placeholder name that was adopted by the WHO in February 2018 on their shortlist of blueprint priority diseases to represent a hypothetical, unknown pathogen that could cause a future epidemic. And of course, it's just a massive coincidence that due to, obviously, the event in 2020, everyone, almost about 80% of the world population, let's just assume, took this experimental needlecraft. And now, just magically, instead of these global scale contagions happening every 100 years, they now happen every year or so. And interestingly too, we see the likes of the World Health Organization claim now that there is a Disease X on the way. There was one headline as well I saw that I believe almost 50 million people could die in the UK due to this Disease X. You know, a totally hyperbolic statement. That's almost what, 60-70% of the population of the UK could succumb to this. But this is the type of propaganda that's utilised. The WHO adopted the placeholder name to ensure that their planning was sufficiently flexible to adapt to an unknown pathogen. Example, broader needlecrafts and manufacturing facilities. Of course, that's how you adapt and take care of an epidemic. So in May 2015, in pan-DEMIC preparations prior to the COVID-19 PANDEMIC, the WHO was asked by member organisations to create an R&D, or research and development blueprint, for action to prevent epidemics, to generate ideas that would reduce the time lag between the identification of outbreaks and the approval of needlecrafts, to stop the outbreaks from turning into a public health emergency. A group of global experts, the R&D Blueprint Scientific Advisory Group, was assembled by the WHO to draft a shortlist of less than 10 blueprint priority diseases, right? Since 2015, the shortlist of EIDs, reverse that, EIDs, or EID, of course that means emerging infectious diseases. However, the reverse of that acronym is DIE, or of course diversity, inclusion and equity. I'm only joking, but DIE, right? Which, funnily enough, yes, you see with that, diversity, inclusion and equity, thinking about it now. So this is what it's all about, right? DIE, right? Has been reviewed annually and originally included widely known diseases such as, you know, I've mentioned all of these, the Marburg, Ebola, Zika, Lassa, of course South Asian respiratory syndrome, and the Nipah and the Rift Valley, all of those pathogens. So interestingly, in February 2018, after the 2018 R&D blueprint coined the Disease X term, meeting in Geneva, the WHO added Disease X to the shortlist as a placeholder for a knowable unknown. A knowable unknown. Meaning it's planned. Now, where do we get this knowable unknown from? Where does that term derive from? Well, it derives from Donald Rumsfeld, who stated there are unknown unknowns. Right? Again, this is double speak. And this is the answer he gave to a question at a US Department of Defense news briefing on February 12, 2002 about the lack of evidence linking the government of Iraq with the supply of weapons, of WMDs rather, to terrorist groups, right? He stated, reports that say that something hasn't happened are always interesting to me, because as we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know. And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the latter category that tends to be the difficult ones, right? So again, total Orwellian doublespeak. So funnily enough as well, Geneva, right? Geneva, Switzerland, that's where CERN is, of course, or that's near where CERN is. But funnily enough, we see that Geneva, Switzerland, and that entire Rhone Valley region was where all of the trade routes, the international trade routes of the Radonites, all went back to that area. That was their home base, their home port within the Rhone Valley, from Marseille up to essentially Geneva. So it's interesting, of course, next to Geneva, Switzerland, are very close, you have the WEF, right? Which, if you reverse World Economic Forum or WEF, you have few, right? A rule by the few. Very interesting. None of this is, by coincidence, of course. So we see the likes of Anthony Fauci, right? He stated, on this disease X, the WHO recognises it must nimbly move, and this involves creating platform technologies. It would seem by that, platform technologies, this is the idea of utilising this as a sort of justification to put into place, again, as we mentioned, this Internet of All Things like system, right? Again, we're not at the Internet of All Things system yet, but they have to begin the process of the mass digitalization of the system to thus ensure the enslavement of the people and the transition to a digital despotism, an algocracy, a rule by algorithm. That's ultimately what is required. That will lead to what the cyberneticists of the early 20th century desired, which was a system of autopoiesis, a system that is self-regulating, a total enslavement of the human population, which will be, at that stage, mere livestock, probably synthetically produced, to ensure that livestock are controlled in a manner that is totally predictable, firstly, and secondly, self-regulating, right? Creating a sustainable future, right, where you will not have to use as much resources to thus control the human livestock population, the human resource. Of course, humans will be phased out eventually, but they have to maintain a certain level of humans to thus do the menial tasks that they desire and to maintain the machines, right? However, that's just a general update on everything that's going on within the world currently, and I just wish to provide that because we seem to be at a rather peculiar inflection point. It seems like there's a storm on the horizon, and they have some tricks up their sleeve. So do be aware of the developments that we're seeing currently, and pay close attention to the narratives they're developing right now, because they're certainly acting as the satyr or cedar of these narratives within the psyche of the populace. So just to add as well, we see firstly multiple reports from today, which is the 17th of January, of what seems to be geopolitical flashpoints occurring everywhere. So you had an attack by Iran on Pakistan, supposedly a missile attack which killed 2 children. The Pakistanis have vowed that this attack will not go without consequence on the Iranians. Furthermore as well, we see that North Korea have just announced that they seem to be mitigating or diminishing diplomatic ties with South Korea, implying or stating outrightly, the reports seem to claim that the only way to unify Korea once more is not through diplomacy, but via war. Moreover, Belarus will put forth a new military doctrine that, for the first time, provides for the use of nuclear weapons, right? So again, these are all narrative points that we see beginning to crop up. They craft this new emerging narrative, this World War III, if you will. Of course, too, we see throughout, for example, the European continent, most pronouncedly within Germany, a rebellion by the farmers, it would seem, and a total crackdown on this by the authorities. Of course, everything seems to be unravelling politically. The World Economic Forum, the primary crux of their agenda this year is about rebuilding trust. And of course, they're speaking incessantly about a new world order, constantly. The UK as well has also committed to an increase of 2.5% in their spending, military spending budget. Of course, they've also implored, or rather warned, all of the NATO allies that it is also critical to grow this defence budget as well. So, I mean, throughout the world, you're seeing this increase in tension. And of course, the scenario that I mentioned within from the German Bundeswehr, the defence department, their Department of Defence, I forget the name now. It outlines a scenario beginning in February 2024 regarding Russia and the West having, or NATO rather, having a mass conflict, right? Now, at the same time, I've mentioned this disease X. However, interestingly, we see that just in the last day or so, we see that health officials warn travellers at Dulles and Reagan airports that I believe those are in Virginia, that they may have been exposed to a highly contagious measles strain, right? And furthermore, we see that Chinese scientists create a mutant crown affliction, if you know what I'm talking about, strain that attacks the brain and has a 100% kill rate in mice, as they admit there's a risk it spills over to humans, right? And this is at the same time world leaders are meeting to thrash out a plan to protect against disease X, and at the same time that the World Health Organization has just proposed a new constitution of which they are seemingly demanding all countries sign on to. So again, we're seeing a Hegelian dialectic play out here, right? But furthermore, it's deeper than that. It is deeper than that. And the reason they desire this world war is because what we're going to see from this new pandemic is it will be a full-on mass death scenario, a great harvest, a great cull, right? They require the war as a diversion, as a distraction, and also to maintain some sort of rigidity within society, because it is fallen at the seams. It allows them to taper the collapse, right? It permits them a soft landing strategy. Again, it permits them a modicum of social control during the descent, right? During the collapse of society. Again, because war is so powerful, because the war mentality it sows within people is so powerful in terms of maintaining a social order to some degree, right? What is going to come about, and furthermore as well, it provides them the justification for going after enemies of the state. So we see in the US that in 2023, and I believe this was first introduced on the 6th of, it's the American format, so it'd be July 5th, 2023, right? You have House Bill 3832. This is under the 118th Congress, Disease X Act of 2023, right? So they've been planning this, for ages. So this has been in the works for at least 6 months, right? More at this stage. So it permits them essentially reading the bill, and the very short bill, and providing a summary. It essentially provides them the leverage, the financial leverage, and also the logistical leverage to create another needlecraft, to ensure the platform manufacturing technologies are there for advanced development and manufacturing of needlecraft countermeasures for these knowable unknowns, as this disease X is deemed. And it provides greater powers to BARDA, right? BARDA is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, right? I forget now, but I'm pretty sure in some of my alternative platform videos I discussed BARDA and its role in some of the research and development into bioweapons and into entomological warfare too, or using insects as essentially bioweapon carriers, and also weapons essentially to offload that weapon system onto the target. So this was proposed by Lori Trahan, right? Who's a Democrat from Massachusetts. Interestingly, she studied at Georgetown University, of which that's linked to Tragedy and Hope author Carol Quigley. And of course, it's a leading institute for recruiting these pawns, right? These political pawns. Moreover, we have Representative Burgess, Dan Crenshaw, funnily enough, and Miss Lee of Nevada. They are the ones who introduced the bill. So yes, the Disease X Act of 2023, right? Again, the X is the end, it's the tab, right? It's the end of the West as you know it. And of course as well, there is now, funnily enough, a new needlecraft facility for Disease X. However, Disease X isn't out yet, right? It is not apparent, it's not a thing. It's still an unknown, even though it is a knowable unknown according to these groups, which again is a sort of conflicting collection of terms, but there's already a needlecraft producing facility for this, right? How can that be the case? If the strain is not out yet, it's not known. Hence the X, which officially means unknown, right? And of course, I mean, this is really all in line with what was mentioned regarding the Deagle forecast for 2025, right? I don't think it'll be too far off once all of these agendas come down the pipe. You're going to be living in a sort of Orwellian world where it is going to become utterly devoid of life. It's going to become a ruin, and you'll be living in that, in essentially a perpetual war. Anyone who speaks out of line must be working for the enemy. It's that type of system that they desire. Again, this is all found within the Zohar, which outrightly states that those who waged war against Jerusalem, right, the idol worshipping nations, that they shall, come the time of the world sovereign, they shall, or Hashem rather, shall afflict them with a plague that will kill them while they stand, right? I mean, it discusses outrightly how they must get rid of the seed of Amalek. Of course, Gershom Scholem, within his very famous work, Messianic Ideas and Abrahamism, discusses that come the time that the seed of Jacob comes out of Galut, or the process of exile, the state of exile, and obviously re-establish their own kingdom, their own nation, that the nations that surround them, the other nations, of course, as the Lord stated, he shall make an end to them, but not to his inheritance. It's, the seed of Jacob. That Gershom Scholem mentions that they shall gradually fade away, right? They shall be basically, extirpated from existence, essentially, right? They shall be excised from existence. I can't stress enough the gravity of this situation. And the really peculiar thing is many people think this is just fear-mongering, or that it is, is simply a way for them to control us through fear. And yes, don't get me wrong, I mean, this can induce fear in people, but these in this group, I mean, it's written about consistently. There's a pattern. I've read it myself. I own these works. I've read it myself. That's why I've come to these opinions. That's why I've went down these avenues of research and study, right? I've written 7 books on it. Not because, I'm a fantastic author and, I have a lot of ideas. I've read these things. I've read it. And I've basically made very simple logical inferences, right? Based on that, or logical connections based on that. That has led me down, paths of research. But I'm telling you right now, whatever you believe that these people are capable of or not capable of, you are gravely mistaken, right? Both sides are. That is because what they're going to do is so utterly psychopathic that I don't think anyone alive today, if you have not read their works, could fully comprehend the level of devastation, the level of utter ruin, the level of utter inhumanity that will, in the very near future, will surface from this ideology, this dogma that they're following, right? And it is very interesting as well, we're so near the end of this all, the terminus stage, that people are still, right now, they either still believe no one dies, they still believe that these people are not capable of this, that furthermore, that Jesus is going to return, that Jesus will save us, or believing in any of these a whole slew, this multitude of dogmas and dialectics, right? Dialectical divisions. You know, are you black or white, left or right? Are you for Trump, against Trump? You know, people still fall for Trump. It's insane. Absolutely insane. I mean, you're so near the end, right? There's a reason it's called the Book of Revelation. There's a reason it's called the Apocalypse, right? It's the revealing of the method. And like what we see in Leave the World Behind, there will be cyber attacks. That's what many of the news reports miss out, the fact that the German Bundeswehr, that report regarding the Russian attack, due or planned or exercised in terms of a war game for February 2024, includes a hybrid war, utilising hybrid warfare tactics, right? Such as, again, cyber attacks, attacks on critical infrastructure, the destruction of communication lines, right? I mean, that would be the easiest way, conceivably, to destroy the West. It's so dysfunctional. All you would have to do, and of course as well, it's so brittle and centralised in a digital sense, it's so tied to its technology. You know, like, almost like a Luciferian nightmare. It's or a Promethean nightmare. It's tied to its technology, right? That it would only take destruction of that linchpin, right? The vanishing of that linchpin for the entire system, the house of cards that is the West currently, for to collapse. And of course, that's all by design. I'm not denying that. But what we're seeing is it will be a global conflagration. It's now at that stage, and the reason it's at that stage is because they have secured all power unto themselves, right? We have very little room for manoeuvre currently. I mean, the best thing you can hope for is to weather the storm. And when this begins, and believe you me, it will turn out like Leave the World Behind. In fact, that film is the closest I've seen to what potentially may happen within the nascent stages. The beginning, the genesis point of the collapse of the West, right? The artificial collapse. That is how it will begin. They're not going to destroy you by having external threats destroy you, right? They're going to ensure you destroy yourselves first. Then they will come along and destroy society and everything. Then they will come along and rule over the ashes, right? I wish to implore people, truly, that the cities are not safe. The cities are not a safe place to be when this happens. All of the systems, all of the technological systems, all of the designed weaknesses, chinks within the chainmail that they have placed there, for example, electric cars and electric vehicles. These things are highly computerized. They can be remotely controlled, right? They can be switched off, destroyed via EMP as well. All of the systems of communication that we have, all of the knowledge base, can be destroyed in a single instance via EMP. It can be destroyed in a single instance via a concerted effort by an external force to implement a cyber attack upon us. That is a regressive structure, right? That is not a structure that is formidable, indomitable, or able to resist external pressures, right? Now, of course, the actual threat has been an external threat that has made its way inside like a Trojan horse. However, you will not be destroyed by an external threat until you destroy yourselves internally, vis-a-vis civil war. That is what is designed. That's what we see with the polarization within, for example, just the political sector or the political field alone. The political racial landscape is a complete and utter, a tinderbox waiting to ignite at any moment, right? It's all by design. I'm telling you right now, if you have the means, get the hell out of the cities. If you have the means, I would strongly urge you, if you didn't in the first event in 2020, you must, I repeat, you must have some sort of provisions in place, right? Some sort of contingency plan. Because when this thing goes south, and again, I'm not making a conditional statement here. There is no condition to this, it's an inevitability at this point. And what is written within the Zohar, all of these other various texts that I won't mention, this is going up to YouTube, so I'm going to have to try and use code as best I can, that these places will be thunderdomes, colosseums, right? Murder arenas. And of course, the individuals they've been inviting, the adventitious elements, right? Again, I'm using a sort of archaic term there for obvious reasons. The adventitious elements they're bringing in are designed to act as marauding bands within these cities. They are the imported looters and brigands, if you will. So be aware of all that. And really, you have to brace yourself mentally. And don't give in to them. Don't succumb to the temptation to give up. Because these people desire that. This is also a psychological game. You have to brace yourself. You have to steel your resolve against this foe. Because it is the greatest nemesis humanity has ever or will ever face. We're between two worlds, two ages. The life you knew has gone. It has vanished with the winds of change. It has vanished due to our collective apathy, our inability to remain vigilant in the face of treason. We must now attempt to stave off humanity's very extinction. We must henceforth, from this day until our last, stave off the collapse of all that is good within this world, the vanishing of the age of man. We must stop, impede, resist, at the very least, the onslaught of the transhuman age. For it is not of God, it is not of good, and it is not of the human's best interest to sleepwalk silently into it.